And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again with a brand new guest, someone I had the privilege of bumping into a month or so ago, someone who's been in my news feed for a while. And then we'll talk about what happened to him when he held a certain poster up in Westminster and the implications of that. But that's Montgomery Toms. Montgomery, thanks so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Great to have you. And people will obviously find you at Montgomery Toms. There is your handle. MontgomeryToms.com is the website. Lots of info. Now, if I can ask you a little bit, on the top of the website, it says at just 14, I saw lockdowns for what they were, the most outrageous and brutal attacks on young people in modern history. I want to get your thoughts on that. As in effect, a teenager growing up through that onslaught, that attack, and I guess that has helped shape where you are at the moment in terms of pushing back on those. But maybe let's know how you were navigating those freedoms. And I guess, why did you question the narrative as a 14, 15-year-old?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really important that we continue to touch on lockdowns. I still don't think that this has been properly scrutinized. I think the COVID inquiry is a complete whitewash, a complete joke. So, and for me, all the issues that we may well get onto later, looking at kind of digital IDs, looking at mass migration, looking at kind of a cashless society, all these things, in my opinion, that they're rooted in the precedent that was set in 2020, which was to say that the government has the ability to take away our freedom, tell us what to do, tell us where to go, and transform the relationship between the state and the individual. And now, obviously, it's taken me a little while to be able to articulate it quite like that. When I was 14, it was as
Well,
simple
you're only
as
20.
yeah, well. When I was 14, it was kind of just simple as my parents influenced a lot of the way I live my life in terms of very freedom focused, and rejected authoritarian control. So of course it's got the influence from my parents, but you know, it really did start for me as to when I re-entered the education system, and I've always been one to reject kind of mainstream education, that kind of like sheep mentality. Never really I was ever unpopular, but it was very obvious that I didn't toe the line on most things, and join in and just sort of, kind of school culture like that. So when lockdown hit, and we had to return to school, obviously, when things just lifted slightly. There were mask mandates. We had to stand in little circles. We were tracked on cameras all the time to see who we were in contact with. We were told we had to do tests all the time. All of it I rejected. Worse than that, I'm not very good at maths. I hold my hands up. That's a real weak spot for me. But I was a better mathematician than my maths teacher trying to lecture me about the fact that Sweden, the data is complete nonsense, and that North and South Dakota, whilst one locked down and one didn't, apparently the data's wrong. I'm like, can you explain that to me? I'm going to be my maths teacher. And what it did for me is it woke me up to the fact that these individuals that are in authority have been swept along a massive psyop, and it really makes you question everything: history, geography, climate change. Even exploring things. I'll just throw in a fun fact for your viewers. My history teacher didn't know who Oswald Mosley was whilst teaching Hitler's rise to power. So that's it's just insane. So it really starts to make you realize, as an individual and as a young person, you have a responsibility to teach yourself. And this is why I'm very pro homeschooling as well, because I just think the education system is a minefield of control. For me, lockdown ignited a pushback against governmental overreach, to which is still continuing to this day, and is, if not getting more sneaky and more behind the scenes. Lockdown was a very frank attack on freedom, and even then there was a minority pushback, right? But now we're seeing things kind of be drip fed in with this analogy of like a boiling a frog. We are, and things are just being accepted time and time again. So I rejected lockdown basically because my parents offered me, this thing called freedom and said, we don't do this as a family. both on principle of philosophy and morals and ethics, and also around science, and just looking at the fact that, there's a 99.997% survival rate, and most people aren't going to hospital, and just looking at obviously debunking the whole thing. And then it sparked something, and I after that kind of ran with it. And by the time I was 16, I was coming into London, I was demonstrating, I was starting to form my own networks of kind of individuals and friends. And as you well know, I've pushed on with it, built my own website, built my own sort of campaign system, and continuing to push back, especially using social media. And one of my main focuses being, I'm a young guy, so I have the ability to, communicate with young people and put this message forward. And, I have the hardest job in the sense that I'm quite good salesman, but I'm trying to sell a product which no one wants, which is understanding the truth. So it makes it very, very difficult, because it's obviously a very depressing thing. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. That's what the lockdown was the beginning of that. The education system, I could rant at you for an hour about all the things they used to do. And I mean, great. It really was like when they used to track us on the cameras, and one person, in my opinion, got a false positive COVID case. They'd come around all the classrooms with a clipboard and like round people up and send them all into the school hall for isolation to then be dispatched. Honestly, it was like, so it was like, and honestly, it looked like the Nazis had come up to round people up. It was a really dystopian, and I've got young people just couldn't see this, and I was sat there just like, this is insane. And interestingly, they never sent me home, and I'm convinced of the fact that I was in contact, with individuals, but they never sent me home. And I think that's because they knew I would just kind of walk back in maskless and freak everyone else out. So all of it is a lot of show as well. I had teachers making up lies about me, telling people that I was wearing a mask on the bus, which was a complete lie. Obviously, I had a lot of teachers, like my math teacher is a great example, science teacher too, pushing back against me, saying, what you're saying is nonsense, which, if you ask me, that's not a teacher's job. But this, emotion took over, didn't it? Logic went out the window and everyone just started acting out of fear, to which me at 14, 15, just ignored the whole thing. I just, sidestepped it. And not only did I sidestep it, not wear a mask, I told people why. And that's very intimidating for people, because that's not an arrogant comment. We all know these individuals were terrified. And when someone came along and just said, I ain't going to do it, the reaction you got was obviously so severe. So it made a man out of me, I think, and has led me to push on and do things on a more well-rounded fashion, looking at governmental overreach and how the state and the individual is becoming too closely aligned, and there needs to be a great separation between the two.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. It's where I put up exclusively all of my content 24 hours a day. You want to know what Steve Bannon's thinking? Go to Getter.
So don't wait. Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
I think it's really interesting hearing from your side as a child growing up. There was how your parents, how their views affected you. You hear a lot about families torn apart, because part of the family saw through it and many others didn't. But then also it's interesting from my side as a parent, making sure I was writing to the school, making sure my children weren't doing X, Y, and Z, had no part to play in any of it. So it's interesting to hear from your point of view as I guess a child growing up through the school, from your perspective, instead of maybe a lot of the viewers, the perspective will be of the parent trying to make sure their child is protected in that environment.
No, the thing is, I'm very fortunate because my whole family barely discussed it. We just went, this is wrong. And we're talking aunties, uncles, cousins. I come from, really, my family are old school left. My mum and dad grew up in really working class London. My granddad was a window cleaner. My grandma worked in a laundrette. My mum grew up in South London. My dad grew up in North London. They had me quite late in life, so they had me when they were 40. So they clearly, they got quite a lot of life under their belt. And my parents were the first people in their family to kind of go and get an education and move in the, go and get an education, have children in a way which, isn't, we weren't poor, we weren't rich, very standard English upbringing. And with that, my dad read a lot, my mum's educated, and I was very fortunate to have that influence. And coupled that with real life experience of not being, because some people maybe accuse me of being posh, but actually what my dad did was the best thing he could have possibly done, and that was teach me how to speak. And that's something school doesn't do, because if you can speak and you can express yourself, then you can go far in life. And I'm not going to say I'm there yet, but my mum and dad have been absolutely incredible influences, and come from the old school left, come from, and they've gone from, like many people, old school left to far right fascists in the space of like 6 months. So as many people did, and all for questioning basic, God-given principles, if you ask me, around inalienable rights, freedom, and that somehow makes us far right. So we are, and then, I remember discussing climate change with my dad and how detrimental it is, and how we need to. Oh, Dad, can we get an electric car, please? I'm really well, and instantly that we question that, and I completely reject the man-made climate change narrative in its entirety. So it's been a very I'm not speaking on behalf of me. I'm speaking on behalf of many people. It's been a transformative experience, and I do want to say, we are in a direction now where we're talking about censorship a lot, and the importance of free speech, the vitality of open discussion, and talking about now the migrant crisis and how it's outrageous that protests are being shut down and people are shocked. And I mean this in no kind of puritanical nature, but I am taking a step back and going, we did experience this 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, and not many people were kind of sticking their head above the parapet to defend that. And the attack on free speech is not a new thing. We've seen this now for coming up 6 years, and you couldn't talk about COVID and question the mainstream narrative on that without being completely censored and shut down. So that's why I always use lockdown and COVID as a prime example when I talk to people about digital IDs and all of this, and say, this isn't just new. This isn't just popped up. This isn't all about the migrant crisis, for example. Of course, there's massive concerns there. I don't doubt that. But this started when the government decided, or the world decided, that it was okay for the states to remove our freedom. And that's why we need to remind people of that.
Yeah. And I think your point about being able to communicate is key. I think schools have torn that out. Any communication skills and debating skills are two huge ones. And I was able to debate at school. Communication skills sucked. You put those two together and you got a powerful way of influencing the public. But on free speech, it kind of, the erosion on free speech, certainly in the UK, it goes back quite a while in all governments, every uni party. I mean, you got the Public Order Act back in 1986, and I think that made an offence to use insulting words, and that's where that changed. But then the Crime and Disorder Act in 1998, that concept of hate speech, and so these have been in legislation a long time, but they seem to be maybe turbocharged maybe in the last 10, 12 years. Yeah. Is that a kind of a fair assessment, or how do you see it?
No, absolutely, especially when it comes to one's right to protest. And the other one they use is disrupting the peace, which is incredibly, I don't know, vague attempt at arresting people. It's not attempt, they succeed on it. You can just whip that out at any time. You're disrupting the peace, and Public Order Act, to which, of course, I don't know if you want to get into this now, but I was arrested under the Public Order Act, and
so let me bring up one of the few pictures I have, and it is there. That's a more recent one. I think that's down in Brighton, at their Pride, and you've got that. You can explain the flag. There's so many parts to the flag, and the flag above you is even more sinister and perverse. But equals mental illness, and then your website. Now, you had that in Westminster. Do you want to give us a little bit of a background? One, why you would make the sign. Two, why you went into Westminster, and then what the response was.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had a lot of pushback, even from those who behind the scenes absolutely agree with me, in the sense they think it's harmful, they think it's too provocative. They accept it being provocative, but they would say it's more than provocative. It's mean, it's nasty, and I've had this discussion, and it's something that I have to consider. But then I do feel that we are British, right? And one thing that British people are meant to be very good at is having a stiff upper lip and having hard conversations. And to be told that I'm being horrible when I'm stating a clinical fact, I think it's more horrible to lie and indulge somebody in what I would call their mental illness or mental disorder. And I think that somebody needs to, maybe myself or other people, it's not just about me, we all need to be contributing in some way to push back against a 2 + 2 = 5 culture. But somebody needs to face these people head on. And look, I'm all for social media, I use it, but I feel uncomfortable talking about these topics online without going into the public domain and actually having these conversations face to face. And it's definitely a mental illness. If someone's got anorexia and they start telling you that they're fat, you're going to turn around and say she's mentally or he's mentally unwell, unstable, mentally ill. The World Health Organization categorized it as a mental disorder up until 2019, to which it had been about a year since Stonewall and the Me Too movement had hijacked people's minds and turned everything into an emotional soup of woke virtue signaling nonsense. So the World Health Organization's policies started getting dictated by societal pressure. So we're in a position where global governmental bodies, which I, by the way, completely denounce and I think need to be disbanded and actually put through Nuremberg trials. That's another conversation.
Now that Fink, the head of BlackRock, is now running the WF, but that is a whole other conversation.
That's another one. They are being run by well, what I would say is how deep you want to go, orchestrated societal divide and conquer chaos. Because for me, I want to turn around and make a blunt comment that it equals mental disorder on the principle that as soon as you start telling me that the sky is red and you gaslight me into believing that, we have a real problem. In the same sense, if you start convincing me, I go as far as to say there's any such thing as gender. I don't even believe in gender. It's just John Money. Someone do your research and have a look at the absolutely terrifying history of where the word gender actually comes from and the experiments that John Money did on children. I want no part of that. And there are two sexes, male and female. And the fact that we can live in a culture where such a small minority can attack the ordinary citizen. People have lost their jobs over making a biological claim. Family and friends have been torn apart. People's positions within education have been wrecked. You can't live a normal life if you just want to say that 2 + 2 = 5, i.e. there are two sexes. So for me to then go to a demonstration stating that biological fact and then to be told you're being a bit mean, it's like, isn't there real cause for concern now that individuals that are even agree with the statement think that what I'm saying is a bit mean when it's just a clinical fact? And if anyone takes the time to watch the footage, they'll find that I do my very best, not easy, but my very best to stay calm, respectful. And what you'll find is, forgive me, am I allowed to swear?
Of course you can. Why not?
Yeah. Well, my favorite quotes from when I went to Brighton Pride was when the initial individual started shouting at me saying, "Pride is about love, not hate. You need to fuck off."
That's welcoming.
Yeah, very inclusive. Or the other individual who accused me of being gay and then told me I needed to leave. Try and piece that one together. So, it's just like, I don't even need to do that much work. I just need to turn up, state a clinical fact, and they'll do the hard work of exposing how ridiculous their kind of culture is. I still believe in freedom. I just don't think it should be imposed on others. It's a real simple principle. And I also think children need to be protected at all times. And the fact that I was watching children walk around with just, in my opinion, like some a new level of inappropriateness. I was in shock. It's like
utter depravity.
Yeah, it really is. And children are just absorbing this, I think, is real cause for concern. But I wore this sign at London Trans Pride, not Trans Pride, sorry, just London Pride. And within 20 minutes to half an hour, I was arrested by 11 police officers. After I withdrew myself from the area as well, I walked 2 streets away once an initial officer came and told me I had to take the sign off. Yeah, I said no.
You did comply. You did move.
I moved.
So you did fit in with what you're asked to do, and then of course they follow you.
Yeah, I was followed by 2 officers, and then 9 further officers came around the corner and arrested me under the Public Order Act. Going back to what you initially said, and for I think that for displaying a sign with writing that causes alarm and distress. So what you're doing is you're policing based on people's feelings. Well, that's not really, I think, what we're supposed to do in this country. We have a constitution, we have inalienable rights. This is what we need to be looking at. We need to be looking at common law and the principles of freedom, and this is completely overlooked. I think the police do more training on diversity and inclusion than they do on inalienable rights. I don't think they even know what they mean anymore. It's just absolutely outrageous. And then for me to then be arrested, put in a cell for 9 to 10 hours, be given some absolutely patronizing interview, all for wearing a placard stating a clinical definition. And then worse than that, being released on something called a pre-charge, which is where you're not charged, but you could be charged at a later date. And that gives them the ability to still impose bail conditions, restricting me from entering the city of Westminster up until they say so, and making sure that I only reside and live and sleep at my home address. So through wearing a placard stating a clinical fact, I've been banned from the heart of my capital city, to which my ancestors built, formed, and fought for. I've been told I'm not allowed to leave my home, and I can leave it, but I can't sleep anywhere else but here. And I've also fortunately been represented by the Free Speech Union, to which I'm incredibly grateful for. But if I was just the average Joe who didn't have that privilege, I would be looking at thousands of pounds in legal fees, which I couldn't sustain. My freedom's taken away, and being essentially punished for demonstrating. It's absolutely terrifying.
What's it? It's not pre-crime. What was the term you used?
It's called a pre-charge. So it's to say we're not going to charge you.
Because again, we expect, if the police, and I grew up in a day where I did trust the police. You obviously are in a point where you never had that luxury, I guess.
Yeah.
But if the police take you to a cell, then you expect they either charge you with a crime,
Mm-hmm.
and then the process starts from there, whether they hold you, whether they release you on bail conditions, or they release you because you haven't committed a crime. And you're saying there's now like an in-between stage where it's not a yes or a no, but it's a maybe.
Yeah, it's nothing new. This is apparently quite common. I actually think, I don't want to say this factually because I'm not 100% certain, but someone was talking to me about how Tommy Robinson, going back, I think 10 years, his whole family was put on conditions allowing them to not be charged, but banning them from Luton city centre or something like that. So this is actually something that I'm quite surprised has not been spoken about, because I think it's outrageous. You can't be charged.
They probably brought it in because of Tommy.
Yeah. It's like it's just insane. We're not going to charge you, but we are going to impose restrictions. And ultimately, if I was to wait, I mean, obviously, I'm with the Free Speech Union is representing me, and we are working hard to get the conditions lifted, and the whole thing just scrapped. But if I were to just wait the 3 months, because I've got to go back to Charing Cross Police Station in October, then the chances are they're just going to dismiss it and go, yeah, we've not found any issues. So it really is, the process is the punishment, simply, but the punishment is obviously completely unjustified and outrageous. And then the screamingly obvious thing, which I haven't mentioned, is 3 weeks later, I went to Brighton, the Brighton Pride, to talk to trans individuals, Not one police officer came and spoke to me. They did their job impeccably. They obviously kept an eye on things to be like, look, what if something happens? So they should, just making sure that nothing gets out of hand. Noticed I was being respectful. Went over to them at the end. I said, I just want to say thank you for being so respectful and allowing me to just be engaged with the public and have, debates. And they said, well, what were the reactions like? I went, well, you can imagine, not too positive. And they went, well, it's important that we all have these conversations and we disagree. I was like, yeah, can you try telling your metropolitan police friends in London that? But it just represents how ridiculous the police system is, because it's completely subjective. And I said that in during the arrest, and yeah, it's more it helps my case. So partly why I went there, to demonstrate how this look, this is absolutely fine. So yes, it's absolutely insane and sets a dangerous precedent. And we saw this in lockdowns as well. I will link it back. We saw hundreds of people being arrested for simply demonstrating. Or I know a good friend of mine actually has the what they give you when they release you from jail, and in there, written on the piece of paper, it says, not charged but arrested for mixing in a crowd of more than 2 people. And it's like on his wall, just basically to demonstrate, to just remind you how insane that is. Arrested for mixing with more than 2 people. It's just mental. And that's what set the precedent for what we're dealing with now. Like forgive me, I can't remember the section number now, but the fact that banned from demonstrating outside of some asylum hotels, that is a precedent that was set by lockdown, and people don't realize that it was lockdown that set that precedent. The police discovered a newfound power to impose on our freedoms, and that's why we'll not forget it, not until Nuremberg 2 has happened.
What a group of 2, the trans lobby use plural terms, don't they, for pronouns? So they and we, maybe they should get charged. But again, I think a lot of the legislation was to combat issues of racial tension. From what I've read back in the Public Order Act, initially it was looking at race, and now it's been expanded. But of course, you were the one that was charged with insulting words, but being at a place where, as you talked about, children, what they're subjected to, surely that caused offense and insult to you or any more normal person. But it's only one way.
It's inclusive until you're just a straight white heterosexual man. And I actually said that, and I got someone shout. They said, "Are you a straight white man?" So that someone asked me at the trans demonstration or something, and I was like, "Yeah." They went, "See, that's the problem." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "So it's inclusive up until you be basically normal." And I'll get a lot of hate for saying normal, but look, that is the case. And we need the kindness is the reality check, not let's cut off your genitals. Oh, that will solve it, and put you on horrific hormone blockers, which absolutely destroy you and disrupt your body in numerous unhealthy ways. No, let's do that. It's a much better idea. It's just insane, isn't it? And the fact that this whole conversation emerged in 2017, 2018, it kind of started to come into existence. So we're in 2025 now. So we have literally been dealing with this for just years upon years. And what's worse is post-court ruling, where the highest court in the country defines there's only 2 sexes, confirms it, because we needed that, didn't we? But it's actually, I think, made things worse, because it's caused this protest movement, if you like, of people now feeling that reform are kind of on the horizon, and they feel that reform are a bunch of far-right fascists. You got Trump in America, and they're feeling like there's some attacked minority, forgetting the fact they've just spent the best part of like 7 or 8 years dictating to the majority that we have to redefine our language. And somehow they genuinely believe that we're the aggressors, when we've had our jobs taken away. We've had female police officers have to anally search men identifying as women. We've had People, we've had headmasters be fired over this. We've had people lose their friends, their family, and all for what? Oh, being a straight white heterosexual man or woman. Well, obviously not heterosexual women. In fact, they probably quite like that. But it's just insane, and it's a shift of culture. It's a shift of clarity, and it is pure Orwellian 1984 gaslighting, which is we have to entirely reject, because if we allow that to happen, then they'll start doing things like literally bringing in newspeak, if you're familiar with that term, and I won't have it. I will not have it. And I'm 20, and I'm looking at my country depressed at what is becoming, and I feel I have an absolute responsibility to do something about it.
I think maybe the pushback is using the word mental illness, and I agree 100% with you. But in terms of I guess with Billboard, Chris, he says children cannot consent to puberty blockers.
Yeah.
You're looking at children and how they've been treated. And then you go past some of these pride demonstrations, you see children involved, and you think you're just a bunch of sexual perverts, a lot of you, if you're pulling children in. There's one thing that adults can do, what they want to do is consenting adults behind a closed door. But when you force it on children, and people who born male, born female, who then have confusion, actually, unless it's intersex, where they've actually physically got different genitals, you would actually be able to help them through that. But that's not illegal. You can't even talk someone through that, because that is illegal and called conversion therapy. So it is an anger that we can't even discuss this and help people, because they are having an episode, whether it's full mental health or whatever on the scale, but they need help. They need someone to talk through this and not cut off any bits.
You're absolutely right. And also the situation of my arrest needs to be sort of split into two separate things. There's the point I make about it being mental illness, and is that the best approach? Let's have a discussion about that. I have no issue with, I'm no snowflake. I can take feedback and I have no problem with that. But there's also the principle of I should be able to say it regardless of whether you agree or disagree. So that's the important nuance here. And whether you would totally disregard what I have to say, and a lot of people do, I do know a lot of people who go, don't disagree with you, Monty, but on principle, I'm gonna absolutely back you on this, because you have to be able to touch on that. And I mean, recently there was another case of a friend of mine, James Harvey, who was arrested. Worse than me, and this is why I think this is. I think that what's happened to James is more terrifying than what's happened to me, because whilst I got arrested, I got let out on pre-charge. Can't believe it's like I'm grateful for that. But he's been arrested for chanting outside of a migrant hotel. He's stopped the boats and send them home, which is a very common thing. And also quite rational. And then in the context of the fact that in that local area there were cases of and claims of paedophilia from migrants in that hotel. James, I would potentially say unwise, but nevertheless defend his right to say it, accused them and shouted filthy migrant. To that, he's now being threatened with 2 years in prison. He's got he's had his house raided. He's been kicked out of his home. And he has had his girlfriend's hard drives taken and searched. He's been put on bail conditions, banning him from certain areas of the UK. I mean, but the 2 years in prison is absolutely terrifying. And then the insult, to rub salt in the wounds, right? You have an ex-Labour councillor turn around and say, slit the fascists' throats, essentially, and he gets off scot-free. And it begs the question, and this is where I put my tinfoil hat on, is this, are we actually playing into a culture of divide and conquer? Because it's so obviously outrageous and two-tier that it's almost similar to lockdown. It was managed so badly that it almost begs the question, are you doing this deliberately? And I don't know the answer to that, but I do think that divide and conquer is an age-old method of control. And I'm really concerned about James. I've known James now. He's formed something called Students Against Tyranny, which was one of the few groups back in lockdown to come out and say, we're not doing this. And he's now looking at 2 years potentially. Obviously, he's going to fight this, and he's got a tremendous amount of support. But I would urge you actually to attend the demonstration. Forgive me, but there's a very new demonstration. I need to remind myself of the date. But it's soon. If you head over to
middle of September, 15th of September, something.
There you go. I appreciate that, because that's my poor memory.
That's 2 days after. That's 2 days after
Yeah.
a huge freedom rally that sadly, Monty, you will miss. So we'll send you pictures.
Well, there's hope. Bear with me. I will do
Good.
my best to be there.
Good.
So I'm working on it behind the scenes. But yeah, there is a great freedom demonstration to which I do intend on being at, and providing I get permission from the state, which is nice, isn't it? And I will be there also in support. I think James will be there, and then you're absolutely right. 2 days after 15th of September, we will be in Norwich supporting James outside court. So all for basically, really, if you were to ask me, and this could get me a knock on the door, but if you could ask me, would I define a migrant as being filthy if they were a paedophile? Yeah, in fact, I probably use stronger terms. So it's I look forward to the popo coming to knock on my door.
But it seems if you renamed yourself Mohammed Toms and just said you just arrived on a boat, I don't know if you'd pass for you may be too light skinned, but basically you would be given more rights seemingly than a British citizen. You'd be put up in a hotel. I mean, the government have never paid me to stay anywhere for a single night. And that's the anger. And that's why the immigration issue is boiling over, because people say, this is not fair. This is not how we do things in Britain.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And really, it's actually been quite accepted. And I've got people being like, I think what James said is disgusting and deserves to go to prison. So there's even a shift in the public, because a lot of the public, I think, are ignorant to the fact this is even happening. But then there's even members of the public that have been kind of reconditioned to accept this being a normality. And I suppose the classic example is a man we all admire, I think, which is Julian Assange. And that was a huge outrage for very good reason. And now it's sort of becoming just, there's another Julian Assange case there, kind of equivalent. And it's interesting. Somebody asked me recently regarding digital IDs and the Brit card. Monty, what happens if they bring them in? And you're absolutely right. I mean, you won't be able to get drive a car legally, because you won't be able. You won't if you refuse to have a mandated digital ID. You won't be able to get a mortgage or rent a flat. You could even argue you won't be allowed into certain venues. So you will be living illegally in your own country. And the terrifying reality is mass non-compliance will be the only way. And in that process, sadly, a lot of people are going to soak up some really dire consequences, including myself. And I would expect you as well. Yeah. And because of that, it's not a case of, you're speaking, we're just going to speak online and comment on these issues. I mean, I work in Together, where we have a digital bill of rights, and we're doing everything we can to push back against a mandated digital ID, and also pushing for cash and financial autonomy and no CBDCs, and a pushback on surveillance, mass surveillance and facial recognition and all these things. But if it were to come into fruition, if we did have a mandated Brit card, the terrifying truth is, we're going to see who is really willing to knuckle down and reinforce the essence of freedom in this country, because the consequences could it wouldn't be out of the question, could potentially be prison time, which is terrifying, I know. But we can't run away, because we have a responsibility to defend Britain.
And in terms of, mentioned James Howard, we've had James on 2 or 3 times. I bumped into him the other week at something in London. We've had Alan Miller on from Together a number of times. And obviously, the Together Declaration, you mentioned organizations. You mentioned the Together Declaration, which I think has been one of the key campaign groups birthed out of lockdown, certainly pushing back against the surveillance and the control. And then obviously the Free Speech Union acting a different role on the legal side more. And we would be in a very darker situation, I think, in the UK if it wasn't for those two organizations pushing for our rights.
I mean, they're just two. I mean, there are many, 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 many more. And this is what I always, there's this culture of our way is the right way and everyone's got to do it our way is never going to work, especially as in the freedom fraternity, so to speak. We're the most disagreeable people ever. We're all the ones that say we don't agree. So to get us all working together in harmony is going to be a real tough job. And together is one area of a united pushback that we have in this country. I mean, there's all sorts of other kind of very grassroots based organizations. Stand Up X is one. They started anti-lockdown demonstrations in May 2020. Stand in the Park's another amazing one. You have freedom festivals that happen. Sounds Beautiful Festival, Hope Sussex, which is a homeschooling environment, and it's got a festival coming up actually, which is all around homeschooling, off-grid living. We have a whole pie, I want to say, of little segments and slithers of people willing to push back against all of this. But you're absolutely right. On terms of a legal front and a being able to introduce mainstream politics and combine it with our incredibly controversial idea, which is we don't believe you should lock us in our homes, as crazy as that sounds, together has been incredible. And has done legitimate work and instilled legitimate change, like with the vaccine mandates for healthcare workers back in 2021. And the Free Speech Union has been an incredible cog to protect and defend the rights of people for stating facts. Yeah, absolutely. I commend both organizations massively. And I believe, we work together. Together works with the FSU a decent amount too.
It does. Let me ask one other question, then I'll bring up a picture to end. I guess the principles you have on your website: freedom first, power to the people, protect our future, truth over tyranny, and defend British values. You could do a whole series on each of those.
Yeah.
But the freedom first, defend free speech, and I'm wondering how you see or where the line is. I mean, I'll say I'm a free speech absolutist, and anything up to calling for harm against someone else is just debate and dialogue. That is the line if you call for harm against an individual. And what you've talked about, holding up a sign, is simply a conversation. So to me, it's well before any line where anyone should really get concerned about.
Well, I actually think that in the whole incitement for violence, sort of question, I've given a lot of thought to this, and I'm a free speech absolutist too. And famously, obviously, we heard death to the IDF. I actually don't. I think he does have the right to say that. Whether I feel that the BBC, which is publicly funded and supposed to be unbiased, should be very clearly supporting and maybe not supporting. I wouldn't say. Well, I would say, but obviously, on principle, I would say obviously airing it to the public. Whether that's appropriate, that's, I think, a slightly more nuanced and different discussion. But I actually think someone does have the right to do that. My position on incitement for violence and where the line is if it has a direct effect. So I'll give you a very quick kind of example. If there is a Muslim individual who I disagree with the burqa, and I don't think it should be banned. I'm very pro freedom, but I disagree with the burqa. Let's say I'm somebody who
you're just not allowed to sell it, or I don't know, shops. But there has to be a line how you persuade people. You're right, instead of just banning it.
But my position around the free speech and incitement for violence question is if on principle, I disagree with the burqa. Now, this is theoretical. Before again, the police come knocking at my door. This is not an incitement for violence. I'm using this as an example. If I was with 10 guys who agreed with me, and it was caught on camera that I sent these 10 guys to go and attack this woman, that is a question of incitement for violence. If I go out on social media and say something like, we need to burn down all the hotels, and someone goes and burns down all the hotels, number one, you can never prove that it was me that influenced that. Yeah. And number two, we have this thing called individual responsibility in this country, and I can't dictate what somebody else does. But in a circumstance of me stirring up hatred towards an individual in the moment where I've got 10 guys who I know I can easily send over to inflict harm is very different. So and my understanding is, I was talking to Michael Schellenberger about this, and obviously he's a massive free speech advocate in the US, and he was saying that that's essentially how it's governed in the US actually, and I think that really kind of, for me, was an important distinction. So that's where I draw the line, and I don't even think that line would need to be drawn very much, because I have trust in the British public that we have a huge amount of respect for each other, tolerance. And I use the word tolerance not in the modern sense of all of this diversity and inclusion nonsense, but just called basic British respect, which used to just be common sense. So yes, it's really, really scary. And you make a very, very important point. Is what I've said is possibly one of the most extreme examples. Me wearing a placard is like 10 sets lower than that, isn't it? So yeah, who knows what would happen if one of us started in the streets calling death to trans people. Apparently it's okay, by the way, again, I'm not condoning that nor suggesting one does that, but it's okay for trans individuals to say death to JK Rowling. That's a no issue at all. You know, they had placards, I think it was 6-7 months ago, saying death to JK Rowling, burn the witch, and all of this nonsense. And that's absolutely fine, unquestionable. So yeah, it's a political bias.
I think as long as you're a member of the Labour Party or Hope Not Hate, then you're kind of covered, so you should be fine. I just want to end off this picture. This is another one of you in Ashton, looking at these flags all across London, and you kind of think that. And it was interesting. Someone made the comment. It was interesting. The TFL one had 2,000 views, 134,000. Maybe they should employ you in their advertising department. But again, this is not the role of a transport company. Should get you from A to B. It should not be involved in promoting any sexual orientation or perversion or anything. Simply A to B. And this somehow you have to pull these organizations back and say, get back to what you're supposed to be doing and ignore everything else.
Yeah, I mean, just to also add in, this video for the first time ever, it's been banned from Instagram and has been taken down. And I'm looking to apply to get it reinstated, because it's apparently a lot of people report it. But yeah, I mean, this video, quite simply, is I just state what the hell is a public service funded by the public doing, promoting a flag which inherently just it has links to the mutilation of children and the puberty blockers. That just doesn't seem appropriate. And then TFL have the audacity to respond to me and say, no, it's really nice and inclusive. It's just like, and I think I even head it with something like, Sadiq Khan and TFL love to promote the child mutilation flag, or something quite strong. But it's true. And it was non-stop. You go through that tube corridor, it's double-sided. I would say there was about 50 posters. And they've got a whole department for it. And they're on my Instagram commenting on the video saying, I'm proud to run the diversity and inclusion department for trans individuals within TFL, or some nonsense.
They're trolling you.
Yeah, I'm assuming they're the ones that have reported the post. I mean, I'll be honest, I live just north, on the outskirt of North London, and I always, and I'm doing it now, I'm looking out my window because I see police cars pulling up slowly, and I'm actually in a position where I keep an eye on police knocking on my door, because I just don't know what's going to happen. And, making sure my hard drives are, well, actually, I shouldn't say that.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows where my hard drives are.
Montgomery has a data center probably somewhere offshore, so they're all fine. Montgomery Toms, really appreciate you coming on. Love your forthright views, and it's so important to have these conversations not only online but also out in the public, in the real world. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for what you're doing, and also your work with Together. Seen that lot, and thank you for giving us your time today.
Thank you for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.